Hello everyone, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be going through my March wrap-up and talking about all of the things that I read in the past month. So this was a pretty, I would say, average reading month for me in terms of enjoyment, maybe a little bit lesser in terms of ratings than some other months, because I managed to finish 7 books in the month of March, and of those, my breakdown for ratings was 1 2-star book, which I don't give out very often, but I think that if you have seen one of my other videos, you will know which book this is, and we will very quickly talk about it anyway, because it's going to be first up. But 1 2-star book, 1 3-star books, 3 3.5, 3 4-star books, and 2 5-star books. So I still had 2 books that I really loved this month, so it's not a negative reading month by any means, but it does still fall a little bit lower than my usual because, I tend to enjoy what I read a lot, and I do tend to rate things pretty highly because I'm enjoying them so much. And in terms of my medium for reading, this month I had 4 physical reads, 2 audiobooks, and 1 ebook, which is a pretty good breakdown for me. I'm still aiming to maybe read more ebooks because, ironically, that's the one that I'm neglecting more of. I've found it easier to transition into listening to audiobooks than I have incorporating ebooks into my reading for some reason, and I think that's just because I still love the feel of a physical book, so I gravitate towards those regardless of what books I actually have on my Kindle. So I'm still in the process of making an effort to read more from my Kindle, but at least I did hit 1 ebook this month, so that is good, and I'm very happy with listening to 2 audiobooks as well. So now that I've gone through my brief stats, if that's what you would like to call them, let's talk about what these books actually were. So my 1 2-star read for the month of March was Crossroads of Twilight by Robert Jordan, and I know that this is universally, or well, not universally I'm sure, but widely the least favorite book in the Wheel of Time series, and I can see why. I have super in-depth thoughts on my spoiler chat video, so I will link that, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But for the most part, my thoughts on this book are that it really, most of it didn't have to exist, and I may have been fine with it if there was a good payoff, but this book also didn't really have a resolution, didn't really have an ending. And compared to Winter's Heart, where I really, really enjoyed the ending, and that made up for some of the shortcomings earlier in the book, this one didn't have that, so the low rating reflects that, and I think that my enjoyment is gonna increase again as I continue with book 11, which I am picking up in the month of April. So that is Crossroads of Twilight. Next up, and the book that falls between 3 and 3.5 stars for me, is Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson, and this is not a 3 to 3.5 star where I casually enjoyed it and didn't have very many thoughts. This is a 3 to 3.5 star where I have extremely mixed feelings on it, and I actually have a lot of thoughts. So basically, my overriding thought on the book is that Daniel T. Jackson is a very good storyteller, and he has really good ideas. It was actually the writing that didn't work for me, and I'm not sure if this makes sense, but I actually think that that's a good thing, because it's easier to evolve as a writer and refine your craft than it is to suddenly be able to come up with good ideas. And I think that his ideas in this book, they were enough to carry me through. I wasn't really enjoying the prose style. I think that he has a problem with telling a lot, telling how a character is feeling, and I know that telling versus showing is one of the most simple pieces of writing advice that's ever given out, but I honestly really noticed it here, and I think that if he is able to get a little bit more like sophisticated in some of his expressions from characters, like the ways to describe how they're feeling without directly telling us, or a little bit more sophisticated dialogue where it's a little bit less stilted. Like, I saw it coming through in parts of the book. There were parts where the dialogue was good, but then there were also parts where the dialogue struck me as like stuff that a real person would never say, and it was very obvious, like, in that sense. So I can see, like, in my mind, this is a book where he has huge potential because I can see it there, and I didn't like the way that it was executed in this book, but if there are changes to that, then I think that I could really love it. And I think that part of that is the way that the writing was communicating to me. I didn't get as emotionally connected to the characters, and so when big moments were happening, I actually thought that he wrote the big moments and the climaxes well, but up to that point, he hadn't done enough to, like, with the writing style, allowing me to immerse myself in the characters where I was feeling stressed or feeling emotional in those big moments. So in that sense, I actually compare this in my own head to The Faithful and the Fallen, because that's similar to how I feel about The Faithful and the Fallen. But I think that I like the ideas in the Illborn more, and I like the plot more. So I don't know, like, I'm gonna continue with this series because of that. Like, I have faith in that sense. And I almost feel like I'm talking myself in a circle right now, but it makes sense in my head. So if you have a question that you'd like me to clarify what my thoughts on this book are, please feel free to ask me in a comment and I'll try and express myself better. Because I just feel like if he could move and evolve as an author between his first book and his second book, and his writing gets a little bit better and more mature, then I will enjoy the second book a lot more. And I was a little bit disappointed that the writing hampered my enjoyment of Illborn, because I was so excited for it and thought that I was going to love it, but then it still does have that aspect of where I think that what he's trying to do is really cool and his ideas are intriguing. So that's why it's such a middle of the road rating. I have very mixed feelings about it, but I'm still glad that I read it. So my first 4-star book of the month was Jingo by Terry Pratchett. This is the 4th book in the City Watch subseries of Discworld, and up until this book, well, and including this book, I have been greatly enjoying the City Watch series. I gave each of the 3 first books in the series 5 stars, and I'm giving this one 4 stars because while I still really enjoyed it and it had a lot of the same appeal as the earlier books, obviously you have Terry Pratchett's humor and you have the social commentary that he manages to blend so well into his absurdist stories, and somehow cuts to the heart of the manor so easily. The thing about this one, I thought, was that I think that he tried to tackle a little bit too much. We had a lot wider of a scope in this novel than I would be expecting usually for a City Watch book, involving 2 countries and involving war, and that was the social and political commentary, which was great, but it was more about the plot threads whereas the other 3 books, I kind of felt like his plotting was really tight and the threads all tied together at the end really well. In this one, I felt like I kind of lost the plot threads in the middle of the book. And then at the end, they did tie together, but it just wasn't quite as well crafted, because I did kind of lose the plot in the middle. And then it came together in a way that wasn't quite as satisfying because of the fact that I hadn't been able to follow it as well all the way through. So that being said, I still really, really enjoyed this, and I'm super excited to continue with the City Watch series, but they can't all be 5 stars, I guess. So Terry Pratchett is still doing super well. And then my next 2 4-star reads for the month of March, I don't have a physical copy of either of them. The first one is The Four Winds by Kristin Hannah, where it is set in Texas in the Great Depression and Dust Bowl era. And we follow a young woman named Elsa, where she, like, when we first meet her, she is 25. She is regarded as like an old spinster because obviously if you're not married and having children by the age of 25, who could ever want you? We follow her as she does end up forming a family, and then later on when she and her children experience the drought and Dust Bowl years of Texas and the Great Depression. And this book is all about the call of the West Coast, where people were moving out to California in droves to try and find a better life during the Great Depression, and the struggle to either stick it out on Texas land or like move to California to try and save her family. And I really enjoyed this, obviously, because I gave it 4 stars. And Kristin Hanna just has a way of writing relationships between women that I really enjoy, and that is really a lot of what she focuses on in her books from my experience so far, because we focus on a lot of mother-daughter relationships in this one, and the dynamics are really like emotional and well done. And I have a little bit of like mixed feelings about Kristin Hanna's like choices in this book in terms of plot, because she does manage to evoke emotion for me, and she does a really good job of connecting me to her characters, and that is where most of my enjoyment comes from, and that is strong enough to have me really enjoying the book. But the one thing that I find is that she puts her characters through a lot, and she puts her characters through a lot of trauma that it almost seems like she's trying to come up with every possible thing that could happen to them. And so after a while, I'm like, I really need to have some triumph for these characters. And sometimes you'll get it, but in the end, I was satisfied in one sense with the ending of this book for one character, but I was very dissatisfied. I was angry about the ending for another character, like angry and sad. And on one hand, I'm like, okay, I was really emotional about that, which means that I was really invested. But then on the other hand, I'm like, well, I wasn't happy about the ending for that character. So that's kind of where I managed to bring 4 stars out of this, because I liked some of the discussions that she was having, and there was also some discussion about like communism and unions and like for the workers and being against capitalism, and I thought that all of that stuff, like all of the political commentary, was really entry level. Like she wasn't really diving too deep into all of that stuff, but it was kind of nice to have that in there, and like recognizing the way that workers were being treated during the Great Depression, and all of that was pretty raw. So I liked that as well, but I think that's kind of just how I settled on 4 stars. And then it's also worth mentioning that the audiobook was narrated by Julia Whelan, and it was really well done. So I'm glad that I decided to listen to that, because I had wanted to read it when it came out and I never managed to buy a physical copy. So I'm glad that I got to listen to it, and she did do a really good job. Then the final 4-star book of the month, and for this one I honestly am hovering somewhere between 4 and 4.5 stars. I've got a few mixed feelings about this book too, is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, which comes out on April 5th, and you should be seeing this video before that. But this book was kind of interesting because it has like sci-fi vibes, but it's almost like science fiction presented as a literary fiction book, and it is I like Emily St. John Mandel's writing style, and this was my first experience with her, so I was pleasantly surprised to find that I liked her writing style. And this was a short book, so basically me enjoying her writing made me like read it pretty fast. I had no trouble whatsoever getting through this. I was really like swept along, and I finished this in 2 days while I was at work. So I was literally reading it on my breaks, and I had enough time to finish it in 2 days, which is pretty impressive because there's nothing that she's really doing that is calling attention to her prose, but it flows well, and it's stylized but not really in a flowery way. It's sort of just the word choices that I like from her. I thought that her ideas were really cool and intriguing, and it ended up being still a really good plot, but not maybe as like groundbreaking or mysterious as I had initially thought. So we start the first half of the book kind of jumping between timelines, and all of this is actually in the book's description, so this isn't a spoiler, but we start in 1912 following a man who has been sort of exiled by his family from Britain for his views about colonialism in India, and he has come to Canada because his family doesn't want him around right now, and he has a strange experience in a very small town near Victoria. And so he has a very strange experience, and then we jump to a time in the future where we're following another woman who knows someone who had video footage of a very strange experience from them. And then we jump to another time point where we're following an author who has included this little passage in their book about a strange experience that sounds very similar. So you can kind of see a connecting thread between all three of these timelines, and you wonder what it could be about this experience that almost seems like a glitch in reality, and how they could all experience the same thing, and what this might mean. And so for the first half of the book, we're kind of dealing with a mystery, and in the second half of the book, we start to unravel the mystery, and a certain character is introduced that is able to be a connecting thread between these incidences. But I enjoyed the first half of the book, I think, more, because I was enjoying spending time as a slice of life with each of these characters, and I thought that Emily St. John Mandel did a really good job illustrating these characters and connecting me to them quickly. And then once we decided to go focus on the plot and actually resolve the mystery, I almost found that less interesting, but I was still interested and I was still enjoying myself. So I think that the choices made in the book were really good in terms of crafting the plot and having it all tied together at the end. I thought that that was well done, but I actually thought that the book ended pretty abruptly, and I was surprised. But if you read this book, you will notice that this choice reflects something that she did earlier in the book, and so I kind of think that that was intentional, and so I respect it, but I also didn't like it. I didn't like the abrupt ending. I was expecting more of an emotional reflection at the end, because that seemed to be what she was going for in the earlier points of the book, and that seemed to be the tone for the whole book, was that it was a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit not slower paced, but we had time to slow down and reflect on things. But then the book seemed to end very abruptly. So I'm not going to spoil what it was that reflected back on, but I did find it very interesting, and I don't know what to think. There's so much about this book that I don't know what to think. And I just ended up somewhere between 4 and 4.5 stars because I really enjoyed it, and I think it's really cool. I do think that people are going to enjoy this book, and I would definitely recommend this to anyone who leans on the side of enjoying literary fiction but wants sci-fi as well, because I think that that will be perfect for you. Okay, wow, I spent a long time talking about those two books, but now it's time to move on to my 2 5-star reads for the month of March, which I will inevitably spend even more time talking about. So the first of my 2 5-star reads in the month of March, or actually I didn't read it first, but I'm going to talk about it first, is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And I actually listened to this on audiobook, and I did not own a physical copy, but when I was finished, I realized that I loved it so much that I wanted to go get myself a copy because I can see myself wanting to reread this. I really, really loved this story. So the setup for this, which honestly, nobody probably even needs me to tell them because this book is so popular, but Evelyn Hugo is an older movie star. She is 79. She has been reclusive in her later years, and nobody has really heard from her in terms of media attention in the past long while. But her daughter has passed away from breast cancer, and she is donating some dresses to be auctioned off for the funds to go to breast cancer research, and she is offering the opportunity ostensibly for an interview about this charity action But it turns out that she is actually ready to talk about her life and tell some of the story of her life. And the question is, like, what are we going to actually uncover about who Evelyn Hugo was and about her 7 husbands that she had throughout her lifetime and her life of fame and fortune and drama, and why is she telling this now? So I'm honestly not going to go too far into this because I do believe that telling too much would be easy to spoil things about this, but I, going into this, didn't really know whether it was going to be my cup of tea, because I know that I had a feeling I was either going to really like reading about the like fame and famous people aspect of it, or I either really wasn't going to enjoy that. And the way that it was written, I think, made me really enjoy it. I really liked the way that Taylor Jenkins Reid did it, because she decided basically to make Evelyn Hugo this extremely forthright and honest person telling her story in a way that is like unashamed and like basically just reflecting on her life. She's not apologizing, she's not looking for sympathy, she's not looking for congratulations. She is just acknowledging a lot of what happened in her life, a lot of the relationships that she had, the way that she hurt people and the way that people hurt her. And it was all just told in this very matter-of-fact manner, while still being very emotional and seeming to be a very raw representation of these relationships that she was involved in throughout her life, and the movies that she was involved in, and all the behind the scenes things. And I just really loved the way that the story was told, and I was so pleasantly surprised by that. And there are specific reasons that I really loved this that I will not say because they are spoilers for the book. But if you are interested in what those are, you can definitely like message me if you would like to hear. But the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo just managed to be like nothing like what I was expecting it to be, while also being exactly what I expected it to be. And that was somehow the perfect combination, where I just like flew through this book, because I don't normally listen to audiobooks super fast, but I did listen to this one super fast because I just kept wanting to get back to it. And that is such a great feeling when you're reading a book and you're just desperate to continue because you're loving it so much. And while I'm on the topic of the actual audiobook, they did a phenomenal job with it. I can't remember off the top of my head the names of the 3 people that narrated it. I know one of them was Julia Whelan because I recognized her name after listening to The 4 Winds in the same month and then noticing that she was also on this audiobook. But I know that they are listed on Goodreads under the audiobook. The narrators are there. And they did a phenomenal job. Like, they brought it to life so well and so perfectly, and I think that they really captured the voices of these characters and the way that they would have sounded, and it was just perfect. Like, I loved it so much, and I'm so happy that I did, because I was scared with all the hype that this book has that I wasn't gonna like it, but I had no reason to fear that. It was amazing. So my second 5-star book for the month of March, and the final book that I have to talk about for this month, is The Winter of the Witch by Katherine Arden. So yes, I wrapped up the Winter Night trilogy in March, and again, like, I loved it. I have loved each one of these books. They fit together so well as a series, but they are also each different from one another, and Katherine Arden did such a great job of that, and I have loved each of them like almost the same amount. I genuinely don't know if I can choose a favorite from out of these. I was so swept away by what she did with this series, and I don't know, there is so much to say. I am doing a series review for this series that should come out later this week, so if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts, you can stay tuned for that. It will be coming soon, but I do have so much to say. Winter of the Witch just, like, it did so many things really well. It continued the development of our characters. Like, we continued with their emotional journeys, and they were able to experience some lows and some triumphs, and you're like, I'm so emotionally invested in the characters that I felt it all the way, and like, watching the plot wrap up was so well done with the developments of the characters. Like, they're very intertwined, and that was like really well done by her, and the scope of the story widened a lot in this book too, but the actual focus of what we were following was small enough that you're still able to keep track of it really easily and get through this book really easily, and the magic ramps up too. The magic is so cool. So pretty much everything like continued to be the way that I loved from the earlier books, while also not staying the same. Like, it continued evolving, so it's not like it got boring or anything with it being the same thing that I loved. It managed to evolve while also still being what I loved, and I was so happy with the conclusion. Winter Night is definitely one of my favorite series now, so I am really looking forward to filming that series review, which I'm probably going to do right after this, right after I finish talking about it. But if you have anything to say, please comment and let me know, because I just loved this so much. So thank you again to Evie for just like running your read along and making me finally read this, because I'm so grateful and so happy. And on that note, those are the 7 books that I read in the month of March 2022. Overall, still a pretty good reading month, even if I had a few lower ratings than I usually do. You know, it happens. You're not going to love every single book that you read, much as I wish that I did, because that would be the ideal life. But I still had some books that I really loved this month and that I am super, super happy that I read. So please let me know what you thought down in the comments. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please like if you liked it, subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday, and I will have information about how you can contact me and my joint Discord server down in the description. And I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!